What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the CombatCast. So today I'm gonna talk about a hot topic coming out of one championship that's been unfolding for the past few days. As some of you may know, at 165, which went down at January 28th at Tokyo, Japan, Sage Northcutt was originally supposed to face Shinya Aoki, but he pulled out at the very last minute, citing some visa issues with his cornermen. Now, a lot of people were very disappointed with Sage. Some people called him unprofessional for this kind of behavior. I myself thought, yeah, it was kind of uncool for Sage to do something like that, and I felt bad for the people who bought the pay-per-view, even though it wasn't as pricey as a UFC pay-per-view, just for the sake of watching Sage fight, But I decided to, wait it out, because at the time, Chatri Sidyodtong and One Championship were only telling their side of the story, that basically Sage decided to pull out of the fight because one of his cornermen had visa issues into entering Japan, and he would just not fight without his cornermen. And according to Chatri Sidyodtong, he tried to solve this problem by offering to have One Championship grappler Tairu Tolo serve as a substitute cornerman for Sage Northcutt, but apparently Sage Northcutt wasn't having any of that. He wanted to have his coaches in his corner, not Tairu Tolo. But yeah, so this is what Chatri Sidyodtong said. This is an article I pulled from Sportskita. I actually asked Tairu Tolo to step in as his cornerman. Tai accepted to be his cornerman, but as it turns out, Sage wanted to have his corner. It's understandable, so that fight fell apart. And immediately, I'm like, man, we just lost Shinya Aoki, potentially in his last fight ever. And then this continues. And then I scrambled, and I remembered we have a backup fighter, John Lineker. And it's crazy because John was sitting in the stands and no one could find him. We didn't know where he was in the stadium. There's 10,000 people, but nobody knew where he was. Then we had staff running around, then we put Shinya and made that fight. I think around the opening ceremony. That was when the fight was made, and that was crazy. So yeah, in the end, Shinya Aoki got to fight, and he fought John Lineker. He won the fight by submission, and you know what? Hats off to John Lineker for stepping in at the very last minute. But at the time, people thought, God, it was so unprofessional of Sage to pull out at the very last minute over what? One of your cornermen not getting visas? But as it turns out, Sage Northcutt finally revealed his side of the story in an Instagram post about yesterday. So here's what Sage had to say. One Championship is implying that I pulled out of the Shinya fight for unforeseen circumstances. That is completely inaccurate. I sent One Championship the necessary paperwork they required to get my coach's visas 48 days ahead of the event. I was told by them over the phone and by text my main jiu-jitsu coach, Fabio Prado, did not need a visa since I paid for his airfare flights and trip, so he was not classified as a working employee that needed a visa, and that my other coach could get in as a tourist, so he didn't need one either. My coaches were there for almost a week, and I was not informed that two of them could not coach until hours before my match. I received a text from an unknown number that texted me for the first time that day that was a ticket salesman asking me about getting my two coaches complimentary tickets to watch my fight in the audience. I personally believe that one championship was not going to inform me that my coaches were not allowed to corner me until I arrived at that arena to fight if I did not hear from a ticket salesman hours earlier. We were also told hours before my match that if my coaches violated the visa requirements and were caught on camera, they could be arrested, and there was a 99.8 conviction rate on all arrests. I made it clear to one championship that I was not flying from America to Japan if I didn't have my 3 coaches. I was told before I left to Japan by an executive that I would not have to fight without my coaches. They knew before I left that I would not be able to have 2 of my coaches. They never told me my coaches could be thrown in prison for any visa violation. There has been a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with one championship, with what caused me to withdraw from my last fight as well as other things that I will talk about at a later time on Facebook, Instagram, and with media outlets. Drug testing, weight cutting policies, active athletes / roster, one stability, etc. Now, to be fair, Sage Northcutt doesn't have the best track record in one championship. You know, he's been signed with them since 2019. He had a rough debut against Cosmo Alexandre where he got knocked out in the first round, and then he disappeared for close to 4 years before making a triumphant return at the one US event in Colorado where he heel hooked Ahmed Mujtaba. And then, yeah, he was scheduled to face Shinya Aoki, but then this whole mess happened. But now that Sage has, revealed his side of the story, this just puts things into a new puts everything into a new perspective. And if all of this is true, I'm not surprised. I've heard stories about one not being honest, not delivering. Yeah, and one telling essentially lies to their athletes doesn't sound like anything new, if you ask me. And if this was true in the case of Sage Northcutt, I think that's very sleazy of them to do so. What they did also denied fans of Sage Northcutt the chance to watch their favorite fighter fight in a pretty big event, if you ask me. This was their first event in Japan since October 2019. It's been a long time coming. For him to abruptly pull out like that with, at the time, no explanation, it's just uncool. And yeah, at first it's easy to pin the blame on Sage Northcutt. When Chatri was trying to cover his himself and the one championship by saying, "Oh, we offered to have Tairu Tolo corner him, but he declined." It subtly throws shade on Sage by saying that he's not man enough to fight. Oh, this guy just needs all his coaches. But when Sage posted this lengthy post on Instagram, you get a new viewpoint. And yeah, it's totally understandable, And one does have a track record of pulling shit like this. Yeah, the fact that they promised him one thing but then delivered another, it's not cool. Yeah, because Japan is pretty strict in terms of travel documents, visas and stuff like that. I mean, for one to tell Sage that, oh, his coaches don't need a visa, yada yada yada, but then turns out they do, and they don't have a visa when they've already arrived, they risk committing a crime already. If not, they've already committed a crime, so they have to fly back to the US. That's just not cool at all on one championship's part. And for all I know, this could spell the end of Sage Northcutt's relationship with one championship. And I think, in my opinion, Sage Northcutt should never have been in one championship. It was a doomed relationship from the start, from his debut and all that. And my final thoughts on this are that I think if one keeps treating their athletes like this, telling them lies and delivering this, promising one thing and delivering something else, they risk losing more athletes. We've already seen an exodus of athletes from one championship. Arian Sadikovic, the former one lightweight kickboxing title challenger, has left. So has Daniel Puertas Gallardo, the former one flyweight kickboxing title challenger. Saigid Izagakmayev, the former protege of Khabib Nurmagomedov. Just the few I can name, but some former one athletes are making it very clear that they've parted ways with the promotion. So yeah, things are probably not looking too good behind the scenes, and I can only imagine that, Sage will not fight again in one championship. If anything, I think he wants to get the hell out of there as soon as possible. Oh yeah, and then there's the news from Beyond Kickboxing that Chingiz Alazov, the one featherweight kickboxing champion, wants to terminate his contract with One Championship, although One Championship wants to work things out. Although, I don't know. One Championship and its kickboxing roster, the situation is just ugly right now, and I feel bad for all the kickboxers there. They deserve much better, in my personal opinion. So yeah. But One lately, I don't know what can be done at this point, One said they wanted to focus on MMA this year, but it's not going off to a good start. Already, you have one of your MMA superstars who's only fought twice in the past 5 years, already slamming you for the things you've pulled. Okay, that's just not a good look. And gosh, I don't know what happens to One and its MMA scene moving forward. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. And gosh, I feel so bad for the athletes, both in MMA, in kickboxing, and in Muay Thai. But yeah, that's why I hopped on to make this episode. I hope Sage Northcutt, goes on to greener pastures. And I think that starts by parting ways with One Championship. And hopefully he can tell the world about his experience with One, And yeah, I think that's about it. And I think that wraps it up for today's episode. And if you made it this far, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And for those of you who've made it all the way to the end, I wish you all a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.